LycanhoodReads. I'm Michaela, that's Spencer, and today is May 4th. It's my birthday, actually. So I'm 26 today, which is a number, and made it through a whole nother year. But even more exciting than my birthday is that I read 10 books last month in April. So today we're going to do an April wrap-up video. And rather than doing a May TBR, since I'm kind of mostly mood reading right now, and I'm not really sure what I'm going to be reading through the month of May because I'm kind of busy this month as well, I'm just going to do a anticipated reads video for May because there are actually a lot of books coming out in May that I'm very excited about. I don't know if I'm going to get to read them all in May, probably not, because some of them come out later in the month anyway, but I am going to at least buy these books. I'm excited about them, and you'll see me talking about them in the future at the very least. Like I said, for this month I read 10 books. My goal for this month was only 8 on my TBR. I didn't end up reading a lot of the books that were on my TBR, but I just would pick up something else random. Like I said, I've been mood reading, and I ended up exceeding my goal ultimately, which is exciting. And it doesn't really matter what I'm reading as long as I'm reading, right? First thing I did this month was finish up my Witcher series read. So I read The Lady of the Lake first thing this month, which is the last book in the main saga of the Witcher series. There is another book called Season of Storms, which is actually a prequel book that I have not read yet. It's the only one of the Witcher series that I haven't read. And while it does technically count, I honestly just was kind of burnt out on The Witcher by the time I finished The Lady of the Lake. Not to say I didn't like the series, I really did enjoy the series actually. It gave me a lot to think about, but I just wasn't in any rush to get to Season of Storms. And I think because it's a prequel, I've got like as much of a sense of the series as I really can get. What I've heard about that prequel is that it doesn't add very much to the story, but it is just a great, like another great adventure to have with Geralt. So I haven't read it yet. I do plan to read it in the future, but in general, I finished up The Lady of the Lake and the Witcher saga. I also started the video game, which I have tried to play before. I have just recently tried to play again, but I'm honestly not in a gaming mood, so I didn't get very far into it, and I don't know if I'm going to continue or when. But I do want to play it one day because it's so highly praised. But yeah, so finished up my Witcher read. Finished The Lady of the Lake. I wasn't crazy about the ending, but I'm just so glad to be done with the series. There's something so satisfying about finishing a series, especially one that's so long. So yeah, I'm super excited to have finished that, and I'm not going to talk too in depth about it here because I think I'll probably do like a little review or discussion over the entire series at some point once I finish Season of Storms, just to have that in there as well. But for today, finished it up finally after like 4 months, I think. Yeah, 4 or 5 months of reading The Witcher. So, Memory of Souls, which is the third book in Jenn Lyons' Chorus of Dragons series. You might have heard me talk about The Ruin of Kings or The Name of All Things. Gosh, I'm in love with this series, you guys. It's a pretty controversial series, I think, on BookTube. It seems like most people don't enjoy it, and I understand why. I was super reluctant to read it after I understood a little bit about the weird perspective it was written in. However, one of my best friends convinced me. He said, you have to read it. You have to at least try it. But he talked me into it. He said, I know, I'm not going to waste your time. I promise if you read this, you'll like it if you give it a chance. And he was very correct because I'm so into this series now. That's the third book. I finally finished it. I'm a little bit behind the series. It's still coming out. In fact, one of my upcoming books for May is the 4th book in the series, which is The House of Always. Got a gorgeous cover. That Memory of Souls copy doesn't have the dust cover on it, but this series has amazing covers. That's the 4th one. I believe it's coming out May 11th. I plan on buying it on Kindle, on ebook, just because I don't have the rest of the series in physical copy. I borrowed it from my friend, so I don't want to just go buy the 4th one, which is probably going to be about $32 anyway in hardback as a new release. So I'm just planning to get it in Kindle because I definitely can't wait for it. I probably will read that one in May. but I don't want to pay $32 for it, and I don't want to just have that when eventually I'd like to buy the whole series once it's out, and maybe if they release a box set or something, I'll probably come for that. All of these books are rather thick. If you don't already know what they're about, I'll just give a little brief summary of Ruin of Kings, or just sort of what the series is about in general. It takes place in an epic fantasy world where there are demons and gods, like legit gods that come down and talk to people and stuff, and it kind of plays with the Chosen One trope, but instead of the Chosen One being the Chosen One that's supposed to save the world, he's the Chosen One that's kind of supposed to destroy the world, basically. And I won't say much more than that because I don't want to spoil everything, but it's such an amazing series. It's got so many, it's such a vibrant, weird, unique fantasy world. It's got really cool magic system in it, and just the characters are so, it's such a funny book to read. The characters are so vibrant and real and hilarious and messed up, basically. They're just very flawed and very cool characters. The character work is one of my favorites, but also the world building is fantastic. I'll say that it's got great representation because sexuality is treated as a very fluid thing in this particular world. It's not something that, heteronormativity is just not a thing here, or at least not in a lot of different parts of the world. The world is full of different cultures, different countries, different religions, that sort of stuff. And I guess some of the cultures could be more heteronormative than others, but what a lot of the characters we're dealing with are very fluid. The main character is a bisexual disaster, and it's wonderful. I love it so much. Some young adult rom-com, I guess, is what you would call it. That's what I've been calling it. I know rom-com's more of like a movie genre, but that's very much so the vibe I get from these books. This is the Henna Wars, and it's a teen rom-com sort of deal, and it's LGBTQ, so there's a female-female relationship in this. You've definitely got a little bit of a coming-out story there, and our two main characters are POC, or women of color, which is very exciting. They're both women of color, not something you see very often. That's definitely what drew me to the book to begin with, and this is a book that I've had my eye on for maybe 2 years now. I'm not sure, for quite a while. I don't remember when it came out, but it took me a while to actually get around to it. And to be honest, when I did, I was a little bit disappointed. It was okay. It just wasn't great. I've been reading a lot of these LGBTQ teen rom-com books lately, but this one just didn't really stand up to the others that I had been reading, I guess. It just wasn't quite as good. The main character was a little bit bland. The characters in general were a bit bland to me. Like I said, compared to some others that I've been reading that were just more vibrant and more character-driven and just had a lot of really good dialogue and funny dialogue, this one just was a little bland in comparison to that. Not bad, just not great. The main character, I wrote some notes. The main character was kind of immature, which, I mean, she's in high school, yeah, she gets a pass. She's, I think, 15, 17, somewhere in there. And it just wasn't well fleshed out for me. There was a little bit of racial tension because the main antagonist of this book is a bully, a mean girl, essentially, that sort of, her main form of bullying is through like microaggressions and just like not blatantly being racist, but still being racist. And I think that while the book tries to discuss that, it doesn't fully commit to it, and like it doesn't want to fully commit to having that conversation, probably because it's trying to keep things a little lighter, which some of the other teen rom-coms that I could recommend have not done. Like, I've had a few of them really come for me in a way that I wasn't expecting, with some of the darker themes. But this one, it definitely pulled its punches, but the actual romantic relationship in it was very sweet. It was something that I was excited to see. I didn't love the main character or the love interest, but they worked well together. I liked their love story, and I wanted them together at the end, so that's what you can ask from a teen rom-com, I guess. This is House of Dragons. which was recommended very highly several times over the fall and throughout the winter by Elliot Brooks over on her YouTube channel. House of Dragons was pretty good. It was actually better than it was a lot different than what I expected, but still good. And I flew through it in about a day and a half, something like maybe 2 days at the most. It was a quick read. It is heavy on the YA, but it's a pretty cool YA fantasy. I'm definitely interested in the world more than anything. Again, same thing with this book as with the Henna Wars, is that the characters didn't feel super fleshed out to me, or some of them felt less fleshed out than others. And there are 5 main characters, POV characters in this book, so, you know, that's a lot of space to be sharing, especially in a book that's not terribly long. And there is LGBTQ rep, a little bit, a sprinkling. It was a really good concept. The world building is pretty cool. I'm most interested in the world and the mythology of the world. That's sort of what I loved most from the plot, was there's a lot of kind of discovering like a secret history to this world that the characters weren't previously aware of, which is pretty cool. It's something I love in writing in general. Like, if there's going to be a mystery in a story, let it be about a secret history rather than a whodunit sort of situation. Definitely leans more towards YA. I came into it thinking it was going to be kind of like the Hunger Games, like a tournament style duel, because the whole plot is that the emperor of this empire dies, and when he dies, the 5 children from the noble families are supposed to come together and compete in this competition to see who's going to be the next emperor, is essentially the plot. And there are dragons. So all the nobles in this kingdom, in this fantasy world, have dragons. And it's sort of like a familiar, where the dragon has been like imprinted on them from birth, sort of thing, like Aragon, I guess, dragon riders, which is pretty cool. Definitely love the dragons, A++, for that aspect of it. But given that premise, I thought it was going to be very much like the Hunger Games sort of thing, where like they're thrown into this tournament and they have to fight, like literally fight. But that wasn't the case. It was more like a series of challenges, different kinds of challenges designed to test different skills. So like diplomacy, just general like knowledge, cunning. And then of course there's combat. And there's another more mysterious test that is sort of hard for me to describe, like an emotional test, mental sort of VR deal. But I don't want to spoil too much about that because that's towards the end of the book. And so I liked it. It's definitely setting up to be a series. At least I think they already scheduled a book 2. I don't remember what the title was. But I'll check out the second book. I didn't love it, but I think it could be leading into something really cool in the future. And there were a couple of characters that I cared about. And I mean, there are dragons there, dude. I'm there for dragons. So, and this one is by K.D. Edwards. It's called The Tarot Card Sequence. The first book is The Last Sun. And this is such a cool concept. So I blew through this. I read the first book, the second book, and a little novella short story thing that takes place in between. So I count, when I'm doing my goals, my reading goals, and my end of the year, reading goals, all that stuff on Goodreads, I count short stories, or rather, I count novellas, especially if they're part of a series. So I don't know if that's what everyone does, or if you count them, but I do, especially because some of them are longer. If I read a 20-page short story, that's going to count. So The Last Sun is the first book, but the world is so cool. So it's called The Tarot Card Sequence, and it's, how to describe it? It's inspired by Atlantis, and so the premise is that it's like an alternate history sort of thing. So the magical, underwater city of Atlantis or whatever is a real place that the world sort of humankind discovered in the early 20th century. I forget which decade, but early, like the 30s or something. And we went to war with them. So all these magical beings, vampires, werewolves, the fae, just creatures of magic, wizards, warlocks, all that sort of stuff are actually Atlanteans. And we went to war with them. It was a big world war. I think they called it the Atlantis World War. And that happened. Lots of people died, as you can imagine. Dragonkind went extinct. All this cool stuff. But then they reached a peace, and now there's this place off the coast of New York, an island off the coast of New York called New Atlantis, and that's where this story is taking place. And so the Atlantis, the way the society works is that they're organized, or they're inspired by, or I don't know how you want to say it, but the tarot cards. So like each noble or ruling house or government is ruled by a tarot card. So the sun would be a house, and then there's like the Hanged Man, there's the Tower, there's Lady Justice, you know, Emperor, Empress, all that sort of stuff. There's a person to correlate, and a person, a royal family, and a house to correlate to all the tarot cards, which is pretty cool. And the main character of this book is the heir to the court of the sun. And his court was actually attacked and torn down and abolished like 30 years ago when he was a kid, when he was a young teenager, about 15. And he was brutally attacked, and he was left with essentially nothing. No family, no wealth, nothing except for the blood in his veins, his magical talent, his best friend Brand, and that's about it. So he still lives in New Atlantis, and he kind of works as basically like a private detective or like a gun for hire sort of thing. Fantastic. I love it so much. It's got all the bro vibes. Him and his best friend are relationship goals. And it actually has a lot of LGBTQ rep because in New Atlantis they're not really very heteronormative, and he says that many times, that sexuality is super fluid. But our main character, Rune, he is definitely a gay man. I don't know if he describes himself that way, but he doesn't show any interest in anyone else other than men. And there is a male-male relationship in the series, which is very exciting. But yeah, the relationship is great, the romantic relationship is great, but the heart and soul is really the platonic found family vibes that come along with a lot of urban fantasy series. So this is actually the novella, so this is the in-between, the Sunken Maw. And that cover art you see there was actually fan art that the author commissioned after they released the story online. So it wasn't like officially published, but they released the story online, and they did this competition to see, you know, all these different fan arts, and they released the fan arts in the winner, and that's the person that won. It's pretty epic, but it's called The Sunken Maw, so that's 1.5 between books 1 and 2. Book 2 is The Hanged Man. Check out that cover. I love it so much. It's so good. So that's book 2 of the Tarot Card Secrets, The Hanged Man. Like I said, I read all of these. I just devoured it. And if there were more, I would have read more. Because that's what I do with urban fantasy series. There's not a lot of urban fantasy series that I have found to enjoy. But if you can see behind me, I have the Mercy Thomas series, which I've been following since like 2007 or 8. When I was in about 8th grade, I think I read the first one, and I've been following it ever since then. The tarot card sequence actually reminds me a lot of Calendros by Rob Thurman. Is a series that I was into when I was younger as well. I think it's still ongoing, or it just ended here recently. But it's got a lot of the same like bro vibes. It's about 2 brothers that do monster hunting, and that's what this is. It's about like monster hunting. There's magic. I really like the magic system. It's a pretty hard magic system, which it's a bit unexpected for urban fantasy, because I find I haven't read the Dresden Files, and if I did, I probably wouldn't say this, but I don't find the urban fantasy series have a lot of hard magic systems, because there's usually a lot of like loopholes all over the place where they just like shenanigan their way out of some sort of magical issue. But with this one, it's definitely hardcore. They have these things called sigils, and that's where their magic, it's not where their magic comes from, but it's how they control and direct spells. So it's really hard for them to work magic without the use of sigils. And one of the things that Rune lost when his family home and his family was destroyed was all his family's sigils. So they're like family heirlooms, kind of. But he lost a lot of them. So he doesn't have as many as all the other heirs and all the other royal families do, which puts him at a disadvantage. But he's a total badass. It's quippy. It's funny. One of the things, I read all 3 of, well, I read the two books on audiobook, and I had to read the novella online. But the audiobooks were fantastic. I don't have the name of who the narrator was, but they were having a blast, and you could tell. And that's exactly how this book needed to be read. They were just loving it, and it was fun to read, action-packed. It was just very well done. So I highly recommend the audiobook for this one. I highly recommend the series in general. I'm in love with it. I can't wait for another one to come out. It was probably my favorite thing I read this month, other than A Memory of Souls. Okay, so something I'm trying to do this year is read at least one new release every month. And for this month, April 2021, the new release was She Drives Me Crazy by Kelly Quindlen. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. And again, we have a gay rom-com here. I guess you'd call it rom-com. Yeah, it's like a teen movie. You know, all teen movies are kind of a little bit rom-com-y unless they're indie films. But this one was really good. I liked it better than the Henna Wars. So it's sort of based off of, has anyone seen Can't Buy Me Love with Patrick Dempsey? I think it's from like 1982 or something like that. It's an 80s movie, one of the not quite as famous 80s movies, but it's based off the same sort of premise. So this basketball player, the tall redheaded chick, she is just like not cool. Her basketball team is like a losing team. They never win. No one ever pays attention to them. And she recently went through a breakup where her teammate moved to a different school with a better basketball team, broke up with her, and then beat her in the first game of the season. So she's having a rough time. She's heartbroken over her first love, her first breakup. And the cheerleader, this beautiful Desi girl, who's the head cheerleader, she's like the Regina George of the school, right? The queen of the school. She's smart, she's beautiful, she's mean, and she barely knows that our main character exists. And it kind of unfolds as you would expect, whereas they are thrown together through sort of as accidentally thrown together, and they end up fake dating to help make not only the main character more popular, but make the football team more popular, the basketball team, the girls' basketball team more popular as well, so that they can finally have a winning season. And as wacky as that sounds, it, for the most part, works. And even though this book is a bit predictable, I will say, first of all, this cover is gorgeous, am I right? Like, that's so beautiful, and it's just so up my alley, because I played basketball when I was younger. I really, really related to the main character, and it's just so fun. I love those 80s movies, those teen movies. I love Can't Buy Me Love. I just think it was just tailor-made for me this month. It was a quick read. I finished it in a day. It was so good. Love the way it ended. Highly recommend. Just a fun, feel-good little book. Loved it. And oddly enough, I picked up a reread this month. Rereading isn't something that I do very often, and when I do, it's rare that I reread an entire book. It's more like I'll just flip through old books and read like a chapter or a scene or something here or there, but I very rarely reread entire books. However, I have been mood reading, and one of my moods was to pick up the Wolves of Mercy Falls series by Maggie Stiefvater. Or Shiver, sorry. I have been reading her for like 10 years, and I still don't know how to say her name correctly, which is rude, but there we are. But this is the first book in the Wolves of Mercy Falls series. It's called Shiver. I first read this when I was in like middle or high school. It's well worn. If you saw under the dust cover, I don't know if you can tell how worn that is. I remember I read it a couple times. My mom read it. I made all my friends read it. I passed it around school a lot. So it's definitely broken in. It's had a lot of work, but so I reread that one. So it's part of my reads, and I'm probably going to read the rest of the series too if the mood keeps up. I'm not going to force myself or anything, but I am reading the second book right now, Linger. So if you don't know what this is about, if you don't know who Maggie Stiefvater is, you should definitely check her out because she is a fantastic writer. And looking back at this series, rereading this, I can see that she's only gotten better. Because I reread The Raven Cycle last year, and it's fantastic. It's better than this one, even though I love werewolves. Werewolves are right up my alley, and I'm here to say that The Raven Cycle is better than this. But she just has always been good and just keeps getting better as far as I can tell. So highly recommend this. You can blow through all of her books if that's something you're interested in doing. She's got a lot of them. So two really great series is this one and then The Raven Cycle. If you haven't heard of that, definitely check it out. It's fantastic. By Brian Staffley? It was really good. It's a epic fantasy book. I read it on audiobook in March. So this month I went ahead and started The Providence of Fire on May 1st. But before April ended, I actually read, it's another novella or short story that takes place between book 1 and book 2. It's called The Last Abbot of Ashk'lon. I don't have a cover for it because it doesn't have any cover art. It was published in a sci-fi magazine or fantasy magazine, I think. So I don't think there was ever any cover art released. But it's that series. I believe the series is called Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne. I'm currently reading book 2, and my last read for April was that short story, The Last Abbot of Ashk'lon. I found it on Tord.com. It's super easy. I'll include a link to read it if you want. I'd hate for you to miss it because I think it hasn't been important for book 2 so far, but I think it may come up later in the series, and you're going to be like, whoa, what happened? But there's a way for you to know. I'm loving the series so far. Like I said, I'm on book 2. That's going to be one of my first books read for May. So there we are. Thanks for signing in. It was good to see you. I'll probably see you at least once more this month if I'm not too busy. Happy birthday to me. Have a great day.